guys. Thanks for joining us here at Boyd Hill Nature Preserve for all things nature with Ranger Christine. Today we're talking about trees, and so I'll be telling you guys about a few different species of trees we have here in the preserve that are really common for us, but not so common in our urban landscape. This will be about a 20-minute presentation. We'll do this once a month with different topics for this series, and basically my goal is to give you guys enough information just to make it so that you know what you're looking at while you're out on the trails and you can enjoy our trails even more. So let's dive into it right now. Welcome to All Things Nature, and here we are at Boyd Hill Nature Preserve talking about trees today. For our first tree, we're going to start really close to the water, so close that sometimes they're even inundated with water. This is the bald cypress, Taxodium disticum. This is a deciduous tree, meaning that it loses its leaves once a year, typically in the dry season or winter. They can grow to 100 or 120 feet tall at the maximum, and they can live a long time, from anywhere from 600 to 1,000 years or more. You'll typically find them in rivers, swamps, and lakes, pretty much any freshwater habitat. They're in the same family as redwoods and sequoias, which is Cupressaceae. And so that is where they get not only their long lifespan, but their large maximum size. They're actually a fairly large tree for living in such unstable soil. Their soil that they live in is unstable because it's wet. They deal with that by having these knees protruding out of the ground. These knees provide extra support. They also provide extra surface area for gas exchange, so they can exchange carbon dioxide and oxygen through those knees, and it helps the tree breathe. Their flowering season is early summer, and their seeds or their fruits are actually cones. Their seeds are embedded within the cones, and those seeds are a very important food source for birds and small mammals within their habitats. And right now, here in August, we have a lot of cones developing. Actually, it's September, and you can see a lot of those cones out here on the trails at Boyd Hill. Next up, we have the Carolina or pop ash. This is not a very common tree at all anymore. Unfortunately, these are endangered due to a beetle called the ash boring beetle. It's widespread throughout the eastern US, unfortunately, right now. And a lot of these trees are disappearing because of this. Luckily, here at Boyd Hill, we have a few individuals of this tree in our Swamp Woodlands Boardwalk. And so as that suggests, they are found in wet habitats or mesic forests. Mesic is another word for wet. These are also deciduous, grow to about 30 to 50 feet, depending on where they are. So not a huge tree, but they can live over 100 years. And their flowering season, which I've abbreviated to FS to save room on the slide, is in early summer. They've got these really cool seeds as well that are called samaras. Samaras are actually winged seeds that are designed to float on the air so that those seeds can travel farther away from the parent tree than it would if those seeds just dropped straight down. Definitely keep an eye out for these kinds of trees. If you have any source of seeds for these, go ahead and try to plant these in any wet area of your yard, and that'll help out with these trees really struggling with their population. So these are really cool trees, and definitely take a look at them next time you're here. All right, next up we have the red maple, Acer rubrum. The red maple is also found in wet habitats, so mesic forests and swamps. They can get about 30 to 90 feet, and they drop their leaves every fall, and their leaves are actually really pretty when it comes to winter time. It's one of the only trees we have here in Florida that really produces those beautiful red fall colors. They can live 80 to 100 years, so not the longest lived tree, but pretty respectable. Their flowering season is early spring, and you can see down here we've got two kinds of flowers, a male and a female. Some maples have both types of flowers on each tree, and some maples actually only have either the male flower on that tree or the female flower on that tree. That is called being dioecious, when they have only one gender of flower on a particular tree. Again, these trees produces samara, and so these are double samaras. You can actually see they have two wings here, one seed each. And again, those are designed to float on the wind so that those seeds can travel farther away and help the species spread through an area. Next up, we've got sweet bay. When you look at this tree, you're probably going to recognize pretty quickly that it is really closely related to our southern magnolia. In fact, these two tree species share a genus, Magnolia. This is the Virginiana species, though. This is an evergreen tree, so they keep their leaves year-round. They're able to do that because their leaves are nice and tough and they don't lose too much moisture in the dry season. They can grow about 40 to 50 feet, live up to 130 years, so not the biggest trees in the world, but beautiful, beautiful flowers that come out in early summer, a little bit smaller than you'd see with southern magnolia. You'll see these in the mesic and upland forests throughout Florida. And so those are forests that can be a little wet in the summertime, but then they can dry out in the wintertime. So these kind of are middle ground trees. Their fruit, as you can see up in the top left-hand corner, is quite dramatically colored. And the botanical term for that type of fruit is an aggregate of follicles, which basically means it's a bunch of little fruits clumped all together. Now, those seeds, which are bright red, are very high in fat, and they're favored by birds. Oftentimes, when you see a tree produce red fruit, those fruits are often targeted specifically for birds, because birds have very well developed color eyesight, and they can detect those really bright red colors a lot better than a lot of other mammalian herbivores out there can. Now, this is called sweet bay as a common name because the leaves actually are quite fragrant. And so you can break them open and smell that really nice floral, spicy type of scent from the leaves. And while it's not the same kind of tree as where we get our bay leaves for cooking, it actually is in the same family, and you actually can use them in the same way if you'd like. Just don't take them from our preserve. Get your own tree and grow your own leaves if you think that they smell that good. All right, another really cool tree in the same type of habitat where it's mesic forests, oftentimes mixing with upland drier forests, is the red mulberry or Morus rubra. These can be kind of tricky to spot because the leaves can change shape as the leaves get higher on the tree. Typically, the leaves that are lower on the tree are going to be more of a fully rounded full circle, whereas the leaves at the top of the tree are going to have deep lobes, and that actually allows sunlight to pass down through those top leaves and also hit those bottom leaves. So it's maximizing how much sunlight the tree can spread out through its leaves. This is another deciduous tree, so they'll lose their leaves in the winter. They can be very small. You know, adults can be as short as 15 feet tall, but they can get up to 70 feet, live up to 125 years, and that's a pretty big, pretty old mulberry tree. They flower in late spring, and so we're already past flower season. But the fruit, which develop in early summer, are very, very tasty. These trees are in the same family as figs, the Moraceae family. And while these fruits don't look very much like figs, and when they're fresh, they taste more similar to a blackberry, when they're dried, you really can tell that they're in the same family as figs because they taste just like a fig when they're dried. Another note on these, they make excellent shade trees. If you are looking for something put in your yard that maybe makes something yummy to eat, and also provides lots of shade from the hot Florida sun. Next up, we've got sweet gum. So again, we're moving a little further up into the upland forest where it's a little bit drier. So you're going to see these where there's a little less moisture in the soil, but they're pretty adaptable. They're not too picky. They are a deciduous species, so they again will lose their leaves in the winter. And they are another one that makes beautiful, beautiful red fall colored leaves for us to enjoy here down in Florida. From 50 to 100 feet tall, up to 200 years old. So these trees can live a pretty long time. Their flowering season is in spring. And their fruit, as opposed to the aggregate of follicles that we found with the sweet bay, here with the sweet gum, it's an aggregate of capsules. So you can see this very spiky little ball where all the seeds are embedded within each little spike. You can see those little holes there. Those seeds are actually really favored by song. So if you are a birder who really wants to get a few more birds into your yard, especially those small, pretty songbirds, a sweet gum might be a really good choice for you. Plus, it's just a beautiful tree to watch change color in the fall, and it can grow quite large. That 100 feet maximum size is not too uncommon with sweet gums. Into the dry uplands or xeric uplands where it's really not wet in the soil at any time during the year except maybe right after a rain. The water moves really quickly through that sandy soil. And this is one of those trees that is adapted perfectly for those conditions. This is the turkey oak, Quercus laevis. It's called a turkey oak because the tips of the leaves with the last three lobes look similar to a turkey's foot. You know, you might have to get a little creative to see the similarities there, but I think it's a pretty nifty name. These are a deciduous oak, which isn't too common here in Florida. A lot of the oaks up in the northern part of the US are deciduous, but here in Florida, we get a lot of evergreen oaks. Turkey oak is an exception, of course. They're not too tall, 20 to 50 feet, but they can live up to 700 years. So they have a long lifespan. They're just not going to get huge. Their flowering season is actually in the fall, and it takes 2 flowering seasons to complete one cycle for an acorn to develop. So it's actually going to take over a year for one acorn to be produced. But these are very large acorns. So these trees are putting a lot of energy into their acorns so that their seedlings are nice and healthy. These are some of the biggest acorns you'll find here in Florida, maybe 1.5 inches long at the most. And the critters absolutely love them, especially Sherman's fox squirrels. In places that have those fox squirrels, they love these acorns because they're such a high energy food and they're so large. To continue with oaks, we've got 3 species of oaks here that I'll touch on briefly, but you're going to find them in the same habitat, xeric uplands and scrub. Scrub is our driest habitat here in Florida, where it's pretty much a sand dune covered in plants that are adapted for almost desert-like conditions. So these are oaks that have similarly adapted for very dry, very hot, and very poor soil conditions. Now, all of these are evergreen. They've adapted their leaves so that they lose so little water that they really don't need to drop them during the dry season, which is winter in Florida. So all of these oaks keep their leaves. Maybe they'll drop them every few years, but it's not a regular thing. They can stay as short as 3 feet tall and still be an adult tree. But they can get up to 20 feet, maybe a little larger for some, especially Quercus geminata here, or the sand live oak. Sand live oaks are very closely related to the southern live oaks, those big grand oak trees that we're all used to seeing. And so the sand live oak can get a little bit taller than the myrtle oak up here and the Chapman's oak down here. But in general, especially here at Boyd Hill, you're going to see them much smaller, probably maximum of about 10 feet. You're going to find them, like I said, in our xeric uplands and our scrub habitat. They flower in the springtime, and acorns are just starting to come out now at start of September. So we're going to have some fully developed acorns by the end of the month. In other parts of the state that have the endangered Florida scrub jay, these acorns from these trees are actually incredibly important food sources going into the winter season for that bird species. And so you can't have a very healthy population of scrub jays without a healthy population of these scrub oaks. Now, one reason why they stay so small is, of course, because their soil conditions and habitat are quite harsh. But another reason is that those habitats usually have fairly frequent fire, whether that's a natural wildfire or a prescribed burn that's done to maintain habitat health and ecosystem balance throughout these different habitats that they live in. And these trees will just resprout from the fire. You know, the tops of them will get burned down to the ground during that fire, but they'll resprout right from the roots. So again, they're not going to always get that big, especially in a healthy habitat with lots of prescribed fire, but occasionally they'll get a little bit larger. All right, in the same type of habitat, we have our longleaf pine. Now, longleaf pine used to be a lot more common in the southeast, but unfortunately, a lot of it, almost all of it, has been cut down for use as timber. And the reason for that is because these are very large pines, up to 120 feet tall. And when they get to their upper age range, 400 years plus, I mean, they can live probably 500-600 years if you let them, but more likely the max is around 400. They can get quite thick, and so they were excellent trees for making lumber from. But that also meant that we have cut down over 97% of the original stands of these longleaf pine forests. Now, they can regenerate these forests pretty easily, but it is a large conservation effort. But a lot of different places in the southeast are doing that. One of the ways is, of course, spreading seeds from these huge pine cones. These are going to be the largest pine cones you find throughout the southeast. These pine cones can get up 10 inches long. Similarly, their needles, as their name suggests, are quite long. The needles can get up to 18 inches long, which is the longest for any pine here in the southeast. And they're actually really, really important trees for their ecosystems as well. Not only are the seeds incredibly important for feeding mammals and birds, but the trees themselves are the preferred habitat for the endangered red-cockaded woodpeckers. And so replanting our native longleaf pine forest is actually a very important conservation effort for protecting certain species and, of course, their habitat in general. These are really cool trees, and hopefully we can keep getting more of them as we move into the future. All right, this is actually our last tree. This is sand pine. So it's almost the opposite of the longleaf pine in that it's got incredibly short needles, only about 3 inches long at the maximum. And their pine cones are tiny, maybe 2 inches or even as small as 1 inch I've seen. Sometimes up to 3, but you know, around 2 is about the average. These trees can get up to 65 feet tall, but their maximum age is only about 80 years. So they're not going to be around as long as the longleaf pines, but they definitely reproduce very quickly, and they can produce a lot of seeds at one time, which of course makes them excellent food sources for birds and mammals, especially the small mammals that can get into those tight cones. You're going to find these in the driest of habitats, especially the scrub. In some scrub habitats, they can actually get a little weedy, and you might have to thin them out just so that you get as much sun hitting the ground as you need for various plants to grow. Their flowering season is in the springtime, And my favorite thing about the sand pine is that there is a variety called the Choctawhatchee variety that is grown for use as Christmas trees. And I think that's only a coincidence, but it's funny that the scientific name for this tree is Pinus clausa. But so if you're ever looking for a Christmas tree grown here in Florida, check out the Choctawhatchee variety of the sand pine. I think you'll probably enjoy it a lot. So, which tree is your favorite? Let us know down in the comments. Come back and watch our next video next month in October on epiphytes. I'll be talking about all the different types of air plants that grow here in Boyd Hill, and hopefully you guys will enjoy learning about those with me. I hope that we see you again, and come and visit Boyd Hill. We've got 8 miles of trails and a campground and all sorts of other really cool things for you guys to explore. Hopefully we'll see you soon, and thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.